Hi, I'm Dean Bushmiller, and we're going to talk about cloud service models and frameworks. If you can't get access to the full recording in this recording, please come to expandingsecurity.com and you can get the full recording. You can also get the list of resources from the Mindmap, download the Mindmaps and quizzers. So let's get started. The concept here, well, first we need to start with the old names of clouds that are out there. And you'll get things like virtualization, grid technology, services-oriented architecture, distributed computing, and browser as a platform. And so you'll hear those names out there, and those are all just other names for the cloud before it was called the cloud. But what we really need is we need some sort of like working definition here. So here is our working definition. It's a pay-per-use model for enabling available, convenient, and on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort or service provider interaction. Whew, there's a lot going on there, right? And we're going to break that down. But first, what do we get out of that? Well, this promotes the availability and is comprised of 5 key characteristics, 4 deployment models, and 3 delivery service models. And that looks like this diagram right here, which is what we're going to go over in this presentation. Now, what we also may need is like a demystified version of this. So really what we're talking about is abstraction here. And abstraction, if you've worked with the OSI model, that's a form of layering. But really what this is a contract. And it's contracted with large optimized organizations that rent you their extra CPU cycles. That's actually what AWS did when they were a book selling company, when they said, what are we going to do with all this internal infrastructure that we have right here? How can we rent that out to somebody else? And so they were renting their extra CPU cycles. The exact same thing happened for large, well-connected empty telcos. As telcos first were deployed, they had lots and lots of connectivity, and they had lots of space that was consumed by these big, huge switching relays, and lots of heat had to be dissipated in those areas. And as technology got better and better, what happened was smaller and smaller needs inside of that same place. Now, they still had to go ahead and run the wires from there, but the equipment got smaller, so they go, what do we do with all this extra space? I know, we'll run into that sucker over there. So that's the first thing that we have to do with is remember it was originally a contract. Now it's grown up into a business where lots and lots of companies are getting into it. The other thing that we have to know is where is the line between SaaS, PaaS, and then there's X as a service today. Now what's happening is the big vendors are washing all of this away, and the one that's getting close to maintaining its integrity is software as a service, but it's barely because they reach into those other markets. Now, really what this comes down to is it all comes down to the contract. And that's a really important distinction there. So let's think about contracting. And really what we're talking about here is a form of outsourcing on your company. And what effect does that have on your company? Now, for cloud, your programmers could have a credit card. And if they have their own credit card, they could spin up their own infrastructure. The SaaS provider that you're purchasing from could have the right to choose another infrastructure as a service provider out there. That actually happened to me in the early days of renting my resources for Moodle that was out there. Also, are those people that you're contracted to, are they bound by certifications or regulations? This is much more so yes for the infrastructure and much less so for the software as a service providers because they can switch anywhere they want to, but you have regulatory requirements based upon your business. And did you know that you were using DIN? Now, if you don't know what DIN is, you should look it up. But what happened was dynamic DNS resources that were used by the big providers out there went down for a period of time. And all those providers that have all those cloud resources, all of that stuff was working. But you and I, when we went to that particular vendor or that particular vendor.com and we went to click on it, it didn't work. Our DNS said, well, we've got resolution on this record, but it happened to be that that big provider that they were all dependent upon was gone. Now, it's very easy when we think about things like power, to go ahead and say, well, if the power's out, then that's not going to work. But do you know about all those other little pieces of contract that may be out there that they have the right to use that you don't know that your business is dependent upon? So you need to be wary of that. And that's what we're also going to learn. Now, let me ask you a question. You went to AWS and you bought something. What did that contract look like? And you don't know because you just clicked. And the reason why you clicked is because you can't shop between cloud service providers out there. Well, in theory, you could go between the big three that are out there. But even if you did, those contracts are all one way. They are bad contracts. And no, really. And here's what I want you to do when you're dealing with, and you can do this with software as a service providers, but I don't think that you can do this with anybody else. I want you to ask, is there an early exit clause? So that's what we're going to cover in this particular session.